Welcome, Watauga Rising Engineers. In this session, I want to speak quickly about variables and the power of using variables in your programming. Now on the left here, this is the sketch that we talked about in the last video on for loops. If you haven't seen that video, please go watch that video. It's about 4.5 minutes long, something like that. It talks about for loops. So we're going to use this as an example of using variables. Now notice in here, the number of iterations, I did something called hard coding the number of iterations to be 5. In other words, I put a 5 there inside my code to define the number of iterations. Likewise, I hard coded in my delay of half a second there, half a second there, and then my long delay at the end is 4 seconds or 4,000 milliseconds. Those are hard coded numbers. I put the numbers inside the program. But what if I wanted to change those numbers? What if I wanted to change the 500 to 200 or something like that? Well, I'd have to go through all of my code and find everywhere that I use that 500 and change it. And that can be kind of tough to do, especially if your program is a lot longer than this example. Say an alarm system program. What I can do is I can use variables. And the code on the right here, this code does exactly the same thing as the code on the left. The only difference is I'm using variables. Now keep in mind that we've used variables in the past before. For example, up here, if you look at the left and the right, this const int status LED is equal to 5, well, that's just like what we've been doing in the past. We just use a variable called status LED, and that represents the pin number for our output to our LED. Of course, we define that output through the pin mode statement down here, but the point is that we've defined an integer variable and we've called it status LED. You can call it anything you want, and generally the number can change throughout the course of the program. Now this is a constant, so it's not going to change, but in this case I've added 3 new variables. Now instead of putting a 5 in here as the number of times it's going to blink, what I did was I put in a variable called number of blinks, and then up here I defined it as an integer and I initialized it a value of 5. Okay? Now, notice here, delay time, I used that instead of the number 500, right? And that's up here. I've defined it, delay time is equal to 500. And then down here is long delay, that variable in place of the 4,000. And so anytime I want to change that delay time, those delay times or the number of blinks, all I have to do is change it up here at the top, and the changes will be reflected every time that variable is used in the program. Okay? And so what I can do is upload this program and see what happens. And sure enough, it's doing the same thing as this old code. But now it's so much easier to change it. I can blink it 6 times, and I can put the delay, say, at 250 milliseconds, and it was really easy to make that change, and now it's going to blink a lot faster and it's going to blink 6 times. Okay? And so that's one of the powers of using a variable, and we'll come back to the idea of variables a little bit later. Alright, thanks. We'll see you next time.